Napoleon Bonaparte once observed in his Maxims of War that discovering a military leader who perfectly combines intellect with bravery represents an extraordinary achievement. What distinguishes a man immediately, Napoleon wrote, is when his mental capabilities and tactical genius are perfectly matched by his personal valor and moral strength. Throughout campaigns spanning North Africa, Sicily, the Italian peninsula, and France, Lucian King Truscott Jr. demonstrated he possessed exactly these exceptional qualities. The man destined for military greatness entered the world on January 9, 1895, in the small community of Chatfield, Texas. Though his family relocated to Oklahoma Territory during his childhood, Truscott maintained throughout his life that Texas blood ran through his veins. Descended from Cornish immigrants who had crossed the Atlantic from England, young Lucian nearly met an untimely end during a childhood incident in his father's medical practice. Dr. Lucian King Truscott Sr. was attending to matters in an adjacent room when his curious son made a devastating mistake, sampling what appeared to be an interesting substance in the physician's office. The boy had consumed carbolic acid, and only his father's immediate response prevented tragedy. Though he survived, the incident permanently altered his vocal cords, giving him the distinctive gravelly voice that one contemporary would describe as sounding like stones being crushed. When Oklahoma's land rush commenced in 1901, the Truscott household joined the westward migration. In this frontier territory, the boy's fascination with the United States cavalry began, a passion that would define his entire military career. Recognizing the financial burden he and his three sisters placed on their parents, the young man formulated a practical plan. He and his mother would both enroll in Norman, Oklahoma's summer normal school to earn teaching credentials. By falsifying his age, he secured a teaching position in Stella, Oklahoma, at merely 16 years old. Following another family relocation, he continued his educational career in Onapa, Oklahoma. Yet, despite successfully establishing himself in the teaching profession, an inner restlessness plagued him. This dissatisfaction ultimately led to his enrollment in the Army Reserves Initiative, which promised conversion to regular Army officer status after completing 2 years as a reserve lieutenant. Lieutenant Truscott received orders, assigning him to the 17th Cavalry Regiment stationed along the Mexican border near Douglas, Arizona. This posting provided invaluable practical education in military administration, mastering morning reports, medical documentation, duty scheduling, and personnel management systems. When World War I concluded, Lieutenant Truscott had accumulated substantial experience as an officer, though he remained untested in actual combat. Anxious about forced return to civilian status, he welcomed the news that his cavalry regiment would transfer to Hawaiian garrison duty. However, before deploying overseas, Lieutenant Truscott made what would prove the most significant acquisition of his entire life. Sarah Nicholas Randolph represented American aristocracy, a fourth-generation descendant of President Thomas Jefferson. She enjoyed both material comfort and elevated social position. Lieutenant Truscott fell deeply in love, and facing imminent deployment to Hawaii, the couple exchanged vows on April 5, 1919, in Cochise County, Arizona. Marriage brought with it advancement to first lieutenant. In Hawaii, he discovered polo and developed into an accomplished equestrian, a skill he would later share with another ambitious officer named George S. Patton. Despite the military's post-war contraction, Lieutenant Truscott earned elevation to captain. The Truscott family's interwar years followed typical military patterns. Hawaii assignments gave way to California postings, then returned to Douglas, Arizona. Texas came next, marking their fourth relocation in just 3 years. By 1925, Captain Truscott received orders to attend the troop officers' course at the cavalry school located at Fort Riley, Kansas, where he subsequently served as faculty. Following a 1934 assignment commanding cavalry troops of the 3rd Cavalry Regiment at Fort Myer, Virginia, where he encountered Majors Dwight D. Eisenhower and George S. Patton and participated in dispersing the veterans' bonus march demonstration in Washington. He received selection to attend the prestigious Command and General Staff School at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. His exceptional academic performance earned both promotion to major and a teaching appointment that continued until 1940. September 1940 brought newly promoted Lieutenant Colonel Truscott's transfer into the evolving armored forces. Shortly afterward, Colonel Truscott traveled to Fort Lewis, Washington, where he reconnected with Colonel Eisenhower. The two officers jointly participated in California training exercises, and both would later engage in the massive 1941 Louisiana maneuvers. Following these extensive field exercises, Truscott found himself reassigned to Texas with the 1st Cavalry Division. News of the Pearl Harbor attack arrived simultaneously, with his promotion to full colonel. While conducting unit training, Colonel Truscott received an unexpected communication from War Department official General Mark Clark, directing his immediate presence in Washington. Upon reaching the capital, Truscott experienced surprise when General Clark proposed an unconventional assignment. Would he consider becoming a British commando? These specialized light raiding formations had emerged from British efforts to maintain offensive capabilities while rebuilding military strength. General Clark elaborated that President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill had reached agreement for a 1943 European invasion, and meanwhile American forces would develop their own commando-style units. General Eisenhower provided additional details when Truscott reported for briefing. Army Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall had concluded that American forces suffered from inadequate combat experience throughout officer and enlisted ranks. To address this deficiency, selected American officers would travel to England for observation and instruction from battle-hardened British forces. Colonel Truscott would lead the contingent assigned to observe British Combined Operations Headquarters, the command center for commando operations. Following intensive study of available documentation regarding Britain's military situation and participation in War Department planning sessions for European operations, Truscott departed for London. During his Canadian route flight to England, word arrived of his May 1942 promotion to Brigadier General. His team began absorbing organizational principles of British commando structure, under Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten's guidance, and he received invitations to attend cross-channel invasion planning conferences. He observed commando preparation and field exercises. The absence of American infantry forces in England at that time, combined with continuing American unit movements to training facilities, prompted General Truscott to establish a unit capable of subsequently training others, rather than depleting existing formations. This decision led to creation of the 1st Ranger Battalion. In June, General Truscott learned of plans for a substantial raiding operation targeting the English Channel port of Dieppe in German-held France. With multiple commando units scheduled for this operation, Truscott arranged for 50 recently trained Rangers to join the assault forces. This would result in the first American combat casualties in the European theater. He witnessed the fiercely contested landing from naval vessels offshore. General Marshall's July arrival in London prompted a summons for Truscott to provide comprehensive reporting on every facet of his London assignment. Subsequently, he attended a meeting with Generals Marshall, Eisenhower, and Clark to review identical information. Using this intelligence, General Marshall commissioned preliminary planning for the Allied European invasion. Allied disagreements found temporary resolution through the decision to invade French North Africa during 1942. Truscott and his planning team became involved in the new operations development and collaborated with Eisenhower and Patton on operational details. General Patton expressed pleasure at seeing his longtime friend. After inquiring about Truscott's London activities, Patton declared, "Damn it, Lucian. You don't want to remain in some staff position in London while there's fighting to be done. Why not join me?" I'll give you a combat command. Truscott responded that he eagerly sought combat involvement, but required Eisenhower's authorization for release. Patton promptly secured Truscott's transfer and placed him on staff where he became deeply engaged in Operation Torch planning, the North African invasion. With planning finalized, Truscott returned to America for his new responsibilities. These involved commanding Sub-Task Force Goalpost, a substantially reinforced regiment from the 9th Infantry Division designated to land at Port Lyautey in French Morocco. Organizing an effective task force consumed all available time, though he managed brief visits with Sarah and Lucian III, now a West Point cadet. Leading 9,079 officers and enlisted personnel, Truscott's Sub-Task Force Goalpost executed landings against light resistance on November 8, 1942, securing Port Lyautey and its critical airfields. Complications arose naturally. During approach, the task force became disoriented. Shower required postponement, while assault elements reorganized. Heavy seas created additional delays. Some landing craft missed designated beaches. At sunrise, French aircraft strafed the shoreline. Overall, however, the invasion succeeded and objectives fell quickly. French forces capitulated on November 10th. This accomplishment earned Truscott elevation to Major General. Following invasion completion, Sub-Task Force Goalpost disbanded, leaving Truscott without command. He approached Eisenhower seeking new assignment and received instructions to remain available for several days. Concerned about slow American progress toward Tunis, Eisenhower appointed Truscott as his Deputy Chief of Staff for operations coordination with British First Army. This challenging position demanded cooperation among American, British, and French forces involved. This appointment would prove essential to eventual Allied North African victory. Once more, Truscott's exceptional performance earned new assignment, this time commanding the 3rd Infantry Division. The division boasted an outstanding World War I record and had been stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington during interwar years, where both Eisenhower and Truscott had previously served. The division had participated in North African invasion under Major General Jonathan W. Anderson. When Anderson received promotion to X-Corps Command, Eisenhower assigned the division to Truscott in April 1943. Truscott's initial priorities focused on improving training standards and physical conditioning throughout his new command. As he later recalled, "I had long believed our infantry marching and combat standards were inadequate, failing to match Roman legion standards, countless frontier history examples, or even Stonewall Jackson's legendary foot cavalry from Civil War history." Adopting Ranger and Commando tactics, he ordered units to march at 4 miles per hour. Despite initial skepticism, the new pace, soon nicknamed the Truscott Trot, was achieved throughout 3rd Infantry Division and contributed to making it among the war's finest combat formations. Alerted for Operation Husky, the forthcoming Sicily invasion, the division commenced fresh training cycles. The 3rd Infantry Division assaulted Sicily as component of newly established 7th Army under Patton. Landings encountered light opposition, and the division rapidly advanced inland. By Operation Husky's 3rd day, Truscott was already forward with leading elements pressing their advance. While observing one battalion attacking enemy positions, his driver advised that standing in mid-road with binoculars invited incoming artillery. The group relocated to a nearby ditch. Soon Patton arrived. He felt frustrated that orders constrained his army to match the adjacent British 8th Army's pace under General Bernard L. Montgomery. The two men discussed the situation and concluded that 7th Army could easily conquer western Sicily with its premier city, Palermo, if authorized. Together they decided upon a reconnaissance in force westward to, as General Truscott phrased it, clarify the situation. Thus commenced the race for Palermo. Days following Palermo's capture, the 3rd Infantry Division resumed combat against Germans in mountainous eastern Sicily. Progress proved slow and expensive. This time Patton dispatched his deputy, Major General Jeffrey Keyes, ordering Truscott to execute an amphibious landing with 1 battalion behind German positions. Truscott endorsed the concept, but insisted it remain within supporting distance of main division forces. This soon generated disagreement and resulted in a rather celebrated episode in Truscott's career. The landing's first scheduled date was postponed when German aircraft destroyed landing craft. When Truscott postponed the next scheduled date because he felt division forces remained too distant to support the isolated battalion, Keyes appeared and demanded the landing proceed. He reported to Patton that Truscott opposed executing the landing. An hour later, Patton arrived at 3rd Infantry Division command post in a fury. Truscott remembered the confrontation. He displayed screaming anger as only he could manage. "God damn it, Lucian, what's wrong with you? Are you afraid of combat?" I responded sharply. "General, you understand that's absurd and offensive. You have ordered the operation, and it's now loading. If you question my ability to execute orders, you can assign the division to anyone you choose. But I'll tell you something. You won't find anyone who can execute orders they disagree with as effectively as I can." Truscott's response immediately calmed Patton, and the two men settled to discuss optimal methods for relieving the amphibious force. Lieutenant Colonel Lyle W. Bernard's 2nd Battalion, 30th Infantry Regiment, itself at 2/3 strength, received reinforcement with 3 batteries from 58th Field Artillery Battalion, a platoon from 10th Combat Engineer Battalion, and a platoon from Company C 753rd Tank Battalion. As Truscott feared, the battalion endured severe punishment in its isolated beachhead, and despite best efforts, the division required longer than anticipated. 7 of 8 artillery pieces were lost along with several tanks and vehicles, but the battalion survived. By August 16th, division forces occupied hills overlooking Messina. The Sicily campaign had concluded. Initially relieved, his division would not participate in the southern Italy invasion's assault phase. Truscott soon received orders from his new commander, Major General Mark Clark of 5th U.S. Army, to prepare for landing farther north once Allied advance achieved progress in that direction. But strong German defense at Salerno Beachhead soon altered such plans. Within a week, Truscott received orders to prepare his division for Salerno landing and joining that battle. While his troops sailed to Italy, Truscott traveled to the beachhead for personal reconnaissance and conference with General Clark. Traveling by PT boat, he visited the beachhead, observed strong defenses, and received orders assigning his division to 5th Army's Sick Corps upon landing. During battles along the German winter line at Cassino, Truscott learned of a previously discarded plan, Operation Shingle, now suddenly revived. The WWII Corps, including 3rd Infantry Division and British 1st Infantry Division, would land at coastal town Anzio, behind the winter line. Initial January 1944 landings proceeded surprisingly well and caught Germans by surprise. But as always, they recovered rapidly and soon had the beachhead surrounded. During early battle days, Truscott sustained leg wounds when enemy shells exploded nearby. Protected from serious injury by his preferred cavalry breeches and boots, he continued duty following medical treatment. The breakout attack failed when unexpected German reinforcements halted the advance. During this attack, General Truscott suffered personal loss when 3 Ranger battalions assigned to his division for the attack were overwhelmed. The Allies assumed defensive posture. For several weeks, Fick's Corps struggled to preserve its beachhead against increasingly heavy enemy assaults. Truscott slept in his headquarters on February 16, 1944, evening when Colonel Carleton awakened him with a message from General Clark relieving Truscott of 3rd Infantry Division Command and appointing him 6th Corps Deputy Commander. Truscott arrived at 6th Corps headquarters to find Lucas and staff concerned over the latest German counterattack threatening to drive Allies into the sea. He observed a prevalent feeling of desperation, of hopelessness throughout headquarters. My optimistic assurance that situations never looked as dire on the ground as they appeared on headquarters maps did little to dispel the pall-like gloom. Truscott contacted division commanders, assessed the situation, and felt satisfied that each had performed admirably. And in fact, circumstances were less severe than initially feared. Days later, Clark visited the Beachhead and invited Truscott to accompany him touring frontline units. During the ride, Clark suggested to Truscott that within days Lucas would be relieved of V's Corps command, and Truscott would replace him. Truscott recalled, "I responded that I had absolutely no desire to relieve Lucas, who was a personal friend, and I had not wanted to leave 3rd Infantry Division for this assignment. I had accepted without protest because I understood that some command elements, especially on the British side, had lost confidence in Lucas." Continuing as Deputy Corps Commander, Truscott developed ideas for improving Allied positions. He summoned Corps Artillery Officer Brig. General Carl A. Baer, and inquired about artillery gun employment. Disturbed by what he learned, he called for 3rd Infantry Division's Artillery Operations Officer, Major Walter T. Dutch Kerwin. After Kerwin explained division methods for massing guns against enemy attacks, Truscott ordered him, accompanied by Baer for authority, to implement similar arrangements for all corps and other divisional artillery units. On February 22, 1944, Clark returned to the Beachhead and met with Truscott, ordering him to assume Vic's Corps command the following day. Truscott repeated his previous objections to relieving Lucas, but was informed the decision was final. Later, after Clark informed Lucas of his relief, Truscott expressed regrets about how events unfolded. Lucas expressed no ill feelings toward Truscott, and the two men remained friends until Lucas's death. As Corps Commander, Truscott confronted problems relating to both American and British troops under his command. Furthermore, Clark had established an advanced Fifth Army headquarters at the Beachhead, creating complications in space allocation, priorities, and movement rights. By May, 6th Corps was heavily reinforced and prepared to break out from Anzio Beachhead. The original plan had 6th Corps striking east to sever the German 10th Army's retreat route. Opening attacks proceeded well and General Truscott felt elated. After viewing attack progress, he returned to his command post where Clark's Chief of Staff, Brig. General Donald W. Brann, awaited. The new orders required Truscott to redirect 6th Corps bulk northward to capture Rome. Only a token force was to remain attempting to cut German escape routes. Truscott was stunned. I protested that conditions were unsuitable. This was no time to drive northwest where the enemy remained strong. We should concentrate maximum power into the Valmontone Gap to ensure destruction of the retreating German army. But orders remained unchanged, and Truscott obeyed, participating in one of the war's most debated episodes. Following Rome's capture, 6th Corps stood down for brief rest. July and August months were spent training and planning a new operation, the southern France invasion. This time Truscott and his Vic's Corps operated under a revived 7th Army, commanded by Lieutenant General Alexander Sandy Patch, a Pacific War veteran. Permitted to select his own combat units for the operation, Truscott chose his favored 3rd Infantry Division and equally battle-tested 45th Infantry Division, which had fought under his command at Anzio. The 3rd Division was the 36th Texas Infantry Division, which had led the Anzio breakout. Truscott planned and executed Operation Anvil Dragoon, the southern France invasion, with minimal difficulty. Landings encountered light opposition, and inland advance commenced quickly. The push toward Belfort Gap proceeded as planned, and Germans were too occupied withdrawing to mount substantial defensive stands. Success continued as 6th Corps entered Vosges Mountains near the German border. As winter slowed operations, Eisenhower visited Truscott, telling him, "Lucian, I'm assigning you to organize 15th Army. You won't like it because this army won't be operational. It will serve as an administrative and training command, and you won't see combat." General Edward H. de Tettenier. Brooks would assume 6th Corps command while Truscott returned to the United States for well-deserved rest, before returning to command the new army. After 2 years fighting in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and southern France, General Truscott was finally returning home. He thoroughly enjoyed his visit. Besides time with his wife, he visited West Point to see his son, Lucian III. As he prepared returning to Europe, he was suddenly summoned to Washington. At the War Department, he learned that a British senior commander's unexpected death had triggered a series of promotions and transfers that would now affect him. One unexpected move was General Clark's promotion to command 15th Army Group in Italy, leaving 5th Army command vacant. General Marshall asked Truscott, "How do you feel about returning to Italy?" Surprised, Truscott replied, "Sir, I will perform my best wherever you wish to send me." Taking his loyal staff, Truscott assumed 5th Army command in Italy, with 300,000 soldiers under command, including at various times Britons, South Africans, Polish, New Zealanders, Brazilians, and soldiers of other nationalities. Truscott's 5th Army pressed against the new German winter line, captured Bologna, shattered German resistance at Gothic Line, and pushed into Po River Valley, dispersing German 10th and 14th Armies. It formed part of the force that accepted the First German Army Group surrender in World War II, when Army Group C surrendered to Allied forces in Italy. Following Germany's defeat, Truscott returned to Texas, then volunteered for Pacific War service. He was assigned to a high-ranking officer group directed to visit China and prepare to serve there until Japan's defeat. But even as the group conducted inspections, Japan surrendered. The war had ended. His assignment to command Chinese army groups against Japan became irrelevant. Returning to Italy, Truscott learned that 5th Army headquarters would become inactive. He bid farewell to his faithful staff and decided to visit his friend Patton, then on occupation duty in Germany. Expecting assignment home to unknown duties, Truscott was suddenly caught up in another of Patton's controversies. As he made farewell rounds, Eisenhower's chief of staff, Major General Walter Bedell Smith, caught up with him. Eisenhower wanted to see him immediately. Truscott reported to Eisenhower and learned he would replace Patton as 3rd Army commander. For the final time, Truscott protested, but agreed that for the service's good, Patton had to be relieved. The exchange between two longtime friends proceeded without bitterness. When introducing Truscott to 3rd Army, Patton stated, "A man of General Truscott's accomplishments requires no introduction. His actions speak for themselves." And indeed they did. As 3rd Army commander on occupation duty, Truscott faced new challenges. Tens of thousands of displaced persons required care. He became involved in Cold War politics when, for their own reasons, some Americans claimed the Army was abusing or neglecting these unfortunate people. Alerted to the approaching storm, Truscott invited newspaper reporters to visit camps and report accurately on conditions. Additionally, he held responsibility for Nazi war criminal trials. He also assumed responsibility for opening a university program for refugees under United Nations auspices. Many who knew him were surprised at his rapid transition from combat leader to government administrator. In early 1946, General Truscott received word that Sarah was seriously ill at Walter Reed Army Hospital. He remained home 10 days until convinced Sarah was recovering. On the return flight to Germany, he became ill. An electrocardiogram indicated a heart attack, and doctors ordered several weeks' bed rest. Told his condition wasn't improving, Truscott retired on September 30, 1947, after 30 years in the United States Army. He later briefly served as Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Promoted to 4-star general rank on the retired list, Lucian King Truscott Jr. died at age 70 on September 12, 1965.